What I'm suggesting is a simultaneous individual, community, corporate, and policy examination. And it is simultaneous, which demands a lot from ourselves. It requires a tremendous slowing down and a process of questioning, as I mentioned before, what we do take for granted, so that our daily behavior is constantly reflected in these larger scopes. The micro is constantly reflected within the macro. And something I'm playing with now, an eco-social paradigm shift, which I'm calling SOUL, an acronym, which obviously has its problems too, but shared, opportunity, used, and local. And this isn't about some kind of hyper idealistic illusion, because when we see, even in larger towns, like there are 2 towns right now in Utah that have instituted growth moratoriums. There are cities, growth moratoriums. That's tremendous. I mean, there are examples when we focus on this intersection of individual, community, corporate, that's when the micro and the macro can begin to shift. And of course, it's unbelievably challenging and confusing and disorienting, because we have so deeply internalized these other values as, oh, well, I need that, and my child needs that, and we need this to be healthy and stable. And when in fact, if we begin to see like the O in soul, shared, opportunity, used, local, the O is a invitation for people to take creative risks together, and for those risks to then translate into bigger pictures. But we have to start, I think it's been clear, we have to start in our personal lives in relation to. So it's not just blaming the individual and ignoring that infrastructures determine so much, or in so many environmentalist constructs, we're blaming oil, we're pointing our finger at oil and gas, yet we're completely participating in those oil and gas economies.
Definitely.
So it's the simultaneity that I think is absolutely crucial, and that requires, again, slowing down and collaborative creative risk taking, and not just to avoid something, but to build a sense of integrity in our lives. I mean, of course, me never owning a car really makes no difference, and I understand that, except I do believe that modeling is education, and that education, and I'm not talking obviously about formalized education, institutionalized education, I'm speaking about education in terms of our daily lives, how we're choosing to interact with one another, and how we're choosing to interact with objects around us and with histories around us. When I pick up this candle, where was it made? Is it petroleum based? When my son's school is looking to buy new clipboards, or for example, music stands, that's what they're doing now, rather than, and they can't afford just to buy new ones. So I'm suggesting, if they can't get donations, let's go to local welders. And this town is filled with artisans and with people who do construction. Let's work with the community, and this is where the soul comes in and the opportunity. Let's work with local community members to build music stands. They may not look like formal music stands that we're used to seeing, but then we don't take these things for granted. And then we can learn, and the kids can learn, the children can learn, that the metal was mined, perhaps in a Bolivian tin mine, and that people's lives, so this is where environmental racism comes in. There are people's lives who are involved in, like, the microphone, right? I mean, how many, we take the embodied energy, the ridiculousness, we're both on these computers, these laptops. I do own a laptop, right? I mean, it's obvious. But in how I educate my son, it's implicit that he understands what happens with e-waste, with electronic waste, that all of these elements are integral. And just one more thing, before you jump into your next question, a lot of what I share and write about and teach, hopefully in a way that is an invitation and not seen as a judgment, is petroleum parenting. This idea of how, as parents, can we look at the ways that we're contributing to environmental devastation and humanitarian abuses and make other collective choices through our relationships to consumerism, through our relationships to corporate accountability, and not just blaming the corporations and blaming fossil fuel investments, but really looking at ourselves, again, the simultaneous, the mirror, the echo.
Yeah.
Which is why with my son, if we have to walk or bike or hitchhike, we've made so many amazing relationships because we've gotten rides from people. And that's not about usurping someone else's choice to own a car. It's about relationship and shared, that goes back to the soul, shared quote unquote resources. And we can talk about the whole idea of a resource being, colonialist and imperialist to begin with.
I want to talk about that next.
But so absolutely, it makes, I think I feel, I breathe that it makes a difference. And it's just one of many departure points from many extending relationships. So that's what I want to say, that it's not an end all by any means, but it's about these interrelationships and constantly acknowledging how our behavior is reflected in others' behavior and how that is reflected in much grander when we're talking about big ag.
Or big pharma.